Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, because your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its flavor, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is therefore no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I came to abolish the law and the prophets. I did not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For assuredly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. What must it have been like to see Jesus riding into Jerusalem? We're in Mark 10 for class. We're going to be in Mark chapters 11 and 12 for our sermon this morning. But before we read anything specifically, just picture yourself. First of all, you know that Passover is this coming weekend. You know that this Thursday night you're going to be sitting down to a meal that will begin the high feast, and that you'll participate in that high feast all day Friday, that the high Sabbath is this coming Saturday. This is not in the same sense of the emotions that are involved, but in the sense of the importance that's placed on the date. This is their Christmas, right? It's not anything close to the idea of like family and joy and all the things that we associate with Christmas. But Christmas is traditionally the biggest holiday of the year. This is that to them. This is the most important weekend of the year, because they're remembering being delivered from Egypt. They're remembering the fact that the angel of death passed over their houses. They were spared because of the blood of the Lamb on the doorpost. So you're looking forward to that. At the same time, you've heard that Jesus is coming. You may or may not have heard of Jesus before. You've probably at least heard of him, but you may or may not have actually been present for anything that Jesus has done before. But those who are may have told you, this is no ordinary rabbi. This is somebody who preaches as if he has authority over the scriptures themselves. This is somebody who preaches as if he can see into your very soul and your very core and preaches to you like nobody else can do it. This is somebody who does miracles. A genuine miracle has not happened in Palestine, at least one that's been written down, for centuries. Here's a guy who meets a blind man, and that blind man walks away seeing and says, Jesus did it. Here's a guy who meets a man with a withered hand, comes out of that interaction with both of his arms fully restored, and said, Jesus did it. Put yourself in the shoes of a Jew in Jerusalem before the triumphal entry. You cannot wait for what you're about to see. Your expectations may vary. Some people thought Jesus is the Messiah. Some people came to that conclusion almost immediately. As soon as they heard of somebody who was both preaching in this way and doing these kinds of miracles, they thought, well, this has got to be who Isaiah was talking about. This has got to be who Jeremiah was talking about. This person who's going to usher in a new wave of regeneration to Israel that's got to be this God. But even if you thought that, you probably didn't think about it in the way that we in the 21st century United States think about it. You're thinking, oh, Rome's about to get theirs. Because we've been under the thumb of the Roman Empire for over a century at this point. And we're just waiting for the Messiah to show up so he can take care of it. Or you're thinking, oh, the Pharisees are about to get theirs. Because we recognize, even though we can't do anything about it, the corruption in the system. And we know this is not what it was supposed to be according to the law. That's actually one of the main things he's been preaching about up to this point. That the Pharisees and Sadducees and all the other people at the top of the pyramid have got it backwards. And so he's going to come in and he's going to, the people who I don't like, he's going to absolutely nail it. What happens when he gets to Jerusalem and is a Nazarene with nothing, riding on a donkey? If you know the scriptures well enough, the donkey might make sense. Zechariah talked about this. Zechariah chapter 9, behold, he comes riding on the foal of a donkey. So if you know that line, okay, I see where he's coming from with that. But still, this is not exactly what I signed up for. And that's the point. Be that as it may, you still have people throwing down palm branches. You still have people throwing down robes for him to walk on. You still have people saying, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. That's a quote from Psalm 118. It's a quote that Jesus himself will lift at the end of Matthew 23 as he's lamenting over Jerusalem and say, nobody will be blessed in you again until the day in which it's said, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. He's talking about his eventual return at that point. So Jesus himself associates himself with that idea, and that idea is very messianic. He who comes in the name of the Lord, anointed one, that's what Messiah means. It's purposeful. And then the first thing that Jesus does after he gets into town is even more weird than the fact that he's a Nazarene who's from poverty riding in on a donkey. Look in Mark chapter 11, starting in verse 12. On the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And his disciples heard it. What in the world is this guy doing? This is the guy who's been hyped up for 3 years. This is the guy who some people think is the Messiah. The person who's going to destroy Rome, the person who's going to destroy the Pharisee system, the person who, in some way, is going to usher in a new age of spiritualism and spiritual renewal for Israel. And he gets here, riding on a donkey. He goes through this big procession. The next day he wakes up, he goes to a fig tree. It doesn't have any fruit for him. He curses it, walks away. What? I was expecting something a little bit more commandeering. I was expecting something with a little bit more charisma. I was expecting at least something that made sense, because he's coming to the most important city in Palestine, Judea, whatever you want to call it. Most important city for the Jews. On the eve of the most important feast for the Jews. And he's been hyped up as one of the greatest teachers of all time. Walks over to a fig tree, doesn't have figs, he curses it, he walks away. And that's all we've got so far. This is not what I expected. And then the next thing that he does is really unexpected, but not in the same way. Verse 15. They came into Jerusalem. He entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. He was teaching them and saying to them, "Is it not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you have made it a den of thieves'?" And the chief priests and the scribes heard it and were seeking a way to destroy him, for they feared him, because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And when the evening came, they went out of the city. That's not good. If you're a Jew in Jerusalem, that's not good. Eve of the most important feast in the year, in the most important city of the year, at the temple. The temple, historically, is where God's presence has been. It's where the Ark of the Covenant is. It's where the high priest does the atonement thing. This is the center of our entire life. We have separation of church and state in the United States. They didn't. This is the center of their religious life. This is the center of their political sphere. This is the center of their social interactions. This is the center of their economy. The temple is it. He just came in and drove everybody out with a whip. On the eve of the most important feast in the year. If Jesus is not the Son of God, which he is, let me preface that before I say this because it's going to sound wild, but Jesus is the Son of God, so this is not the case. If he wasn't the Son of God, that is an act of terrorism. That is an act against the government and the religious corpus and the entire socioeconomic status. If he's not who he says he is now, he is deserving of the punishment that he ends up getting. The Pharisees and people who put him on trial point back to this. This is the inciting incident. He's been a thorn in the side for a long time, but he just attacked people more or less in the temple. Now, we know that he did that for a reason. We know, first of all, that Jesus has never made a mistake and will never make a mistake. We know that he had noble intentions behind what he did, and that he executed them perfectly, because he executes everything perfectly. But they don't know that, and if you're a Jew living in Jerusalem up to this point, you're thinking, that's bad. I've been tempted to place my faith in this guy, but I don't know if I can do that anymore. And the fig tree thing, and then he seems kind of erratic. He seems kind of random. I don't get it. He's most definitely not what I expected. Verse 20. As they passed by the next morning, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. This is not a dead branch. This is not a wilting tree. It's as if it's been dead for years. And Peter, of course, Peter the loudmouth, remembered and said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered." And Jesus answered them, "Have faith in God." He's not what you expected. And that's the point. The fig tree thing seems kind of random until you put it in the context of what else is going on. He comes in a form that nobody expected and that the status quo people were really, really upset about. I mean, he's making himself out to be a king, which he is. He's the heir to the throne of David. But he's making himself out to be a king. Then he goes and does the fig tree thing, doesn't find any figs on it, curses it. Then he goes to the temple, and if you don't know what Jesus is doing, acts like a madman. He's kind of acting like a madman in this entire week so far, if you don't know what Jesus is doing, if you don't believe in that he is who he says he is. Then he comes back from clearing the temple out, finds the fig tree dead, and tells his followers on the basis of a dead fig tree, have faith in God. Why did the fig tree get cursed? I mean, you could technically go back and say Jesus was hungry. But why did the fig tree get cursed in terms of what the fig tree was expected to do? What's the purpose of a fig tree if you're hungry? That better have a fig on it. You go to McDonald's looking for a hamburger. You go to Taco Bell looking for a taco. You go to a fig tree looking for a fig, right? That's the whole point of having a fig tree if you're hungry. Jesus goes to it. It doesn't have a fig tree. It's not fulfilling its purpose for me. Therefore, I'm going to curse it. What was the point of cleansing the temple? You're not fulfilling your purpose anymore. The temple is supposed to be a house of worship. The temple is supposed to be a place of unity where everybody can come together to worship regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of their ability to buy a lamb or a turtle dove or anything like that that they would need for a sacrifice. The temple is supposed to be a place where God is not gate-kept, and where his people can come together and have access to him and worship him because he's God and because they're his people. You're not doing that. You're doing the opposite. You've made it into a den of thieves. You've made it into a house of merchandise. You've made it into, you have to look like this, have this much money, have these sets of intentions if you're welcome in this temple. You're gatekeeping God. And because of that, you have totally missed the point. Worship is, God is good, and I'm giving my entire being into proclaiming the fact that God is good. Mind, body, soul. You've made it into, you've got to come through our house of wares in order to be able to be here. You're not fulfilling your purpose anymore. And then he comes back to the fig tree and what's happened to it. Have faith in God. Any tree that has not been planted by my Father will be uprooted. Are we fulfilling our purpose as the church? Or are we gatekeeping God? This becomes a much more specific debate over the course of the next couple of days. The Pharisees and Sadducees and scribes are not going to just forget the fact that he attacked the temple. They don't understand it. He did it for a reason. He did it for a righteous purpose. But they don't know that. So now they have to confront him based on their social standing. 27. They came again to Jerusalem. As he was walking in the temple, he's been there before, it didn't go well. The chief priests and the scribes and the elders came to him and they said to him, by what authority are you doing these things, or who gave you this authority to do them? So they're expecting another temple cleansing, or at least they're expecting something like it. Preaching against them, preaching against the system, preaching against the marketplace aspect. Yesterday didn't go well, they're expecting today to not go well. So they confront him and they said, you're not going to be able to just do this time. By what authority are you doing these things? Jesus answered them, I will ask you one question. Answer me and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? Jesus asks a lot of questions over the course of his ministry. Which is funny, because Jesus almost always knows the answer. He knows the answer to this question. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? Well, since John was the one preparing the way of the Lord, and John's birth was by miraculous intervention, and John preached about Jesus, and John baptized Jesus, he knows the answer to the question. So do they. Their reaction to this question is not to answer it. They discuss among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, they will say, why did you not believe it? But if we say from men, they were afraid of the people, for all that held that John was really a prophet. So they answered to Jesus, we don't know. Was that true? No, they knew. Therefore, Jesus says, I don't have to answer. Because you've failed to fulfill your purpose. John fulfilled his purpose. John fulfilled his purpose so well that now, 3 years later, and he's dead, you're still scared of him. You're still scared to talk about it. Because even his reputation, though he's not here, is a threat to your system. He fulfilled his purpose so well that he's speaking beyond the grave about it. I seem to recall the passage in Hebrews 11 where Abel, even though he's dead, his blood still speaks. But you, Pharisees, have failed to fulfill your purpose. You know the law better than anybody else. For one thing, you can read. That puts you ahead of about 90% of society at this point. But you've also dedicated your life to the law, to the teaching of the law, to the protection of the law. And you're coming into a temple that has become a marketplace and not doing a thing about it. He says in Luke 12:48, to whom much is given, of him much will be required. You've been given the keys to the kingdom, in a metaphorical sense. You've been given everything that you should have needed for the law to be correctly taught, correctly applied. You have fallen down on the job. You have failed to keep your purpose. And what happens for the rest of Mark chapter 12, really for the whole of Mark chapter 12, is continual debate about that concept. The Pharisees come with the question, they can't stand up to Jesus about it. The Sadducees come with the question, they can't stand up to Jesus about it. The scribes come with the question, they can't stand up to Jesus about it. The reason that they can't is because they've so thoroughly failed to fulfill their purpose, they can't even talk shop about the word anymore. Even if they don't apply it, they're supposed to know. Jesus in Matthew 23 says, if they teach you to do something, do it. If they do something, don't do what they do, because they wouldn't lift a finger to help you, and that's kind of the whole point of the law. They're supposed to at least be able to teach this. I'm reminded of John chapter 3. Nicodemus is met with this concept of being born again. He's totally befuddled by it. And Jesus says, are you the teacher of Israel and you don't know this? It's kind of the same game that he's playing here. They come to the question about taxation. He says, this is the answer to that question about taxation. Give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, to God the things that are God's. They don't like that. They make taxes on that stuff that they're selling at the temple. But they know that he's right. Sadducees come with a question about resurrection. Girl's been married to 7 different brothers over the course of her life. Levitical law stuff. At the end, in the resurrection, which they don't believe in, whose wife will she be? Jesus says, that's a terrible question. They're not given or given in marriage in the resurrection. And also, by the way, God is the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. He's not the God of the dead and of the living. Therefore, Jesus even says, therefore, you're greatly mistaken. Like you're not even close. They don't like that because that goes against everything that they, as the Sadducees, have been teaching for decades. But they know that he's right. Scribe comes to Jesus and says, "Good teacher, what's the greatest commandment of the law?" Now this is an obvious gotcha. If you say any command, theoretically, you're downplaying another command. This is an obvious, so you don't think that this is important, but you do think that this is important, so you're picking and choosing. That's what the scribe wants to get out of Jesus, except that Jesus gives the right answer. Love God with everything that you have and love your neighbor as yourself. On this hangs all the law and the prophets. And they don't like it, because what is a scribe supposed to do? A scribe copies the entirety of the law. A scribe makes sure that the entirety of the law is well preserved, that no iota or dot has passed away from it. And they don't like the fact that you can simplify it down into two, because that makes my profession look useless. And Jesus says, it is useless because you failed to fulfill your purpose. He's winning every ideological battle. He looks at every segment of the Jewish system and says, you failed, you failed, you failed. And the reason that you failed is because you didn't listen to what I said after I cursed the fig tree and it died. I said have faith in God, but I went beyond that. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and throw it into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart but believes what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also who is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. Nothing will be impossible with God. We talked about that this morning, and we've already talked a little bit about what it means. But what Jesus makes it mean here is that if you say, I want to pick up that mountain and throw it into the ocean, and you believe 100% that that's going to happen, it's going to happen. But then he starts talking about spiritual reality. So is he talking about like we can physically become a superhero and move a mountain into an ocean? No. What he's saying is you've failed to fulfill your purpose, and the way that you begin to fulfill your purpose again is to put your faith in God. Not in yourself, not in your systems, not in the status quo, not in what's become normal, not in what's become expected. You put your faith in God. To the point that you forgive the people around you. Forgiveness relies on faith in God. If you don't have faith in God, you can make a really good case that you'll never forgive anybody in your life, really. Because there will always be in the back of my head, but they hurt me. We talk about forgiving and forgetting, right? An elephant never forgets. And my kids all the time tell me I look like an elephant. So there's always going to be, but they hurt me. But they wronged me. But what if they do it again? Unless I put my faith in God to the point that I can say, forgive them, they know not what they do. Jesus said that on a cross. I could probably stand to say it in my everyday life. That's how you begin to fulfill your purpose again. And at the end of Mark chapter 12, after he's won all the ideological battles, after he's had the standoff, after he's summarily disposed with every part of the Jewish system up to that, Jesus makes sure that his disciples see one thing. Verse 41. And he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. And many people who were rich put in large sums. And a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance. But she out of her poverty put in everything that she had, all she has to live on." Flip the script. You've been thinking from the perspective of a Jew in Jerusalem who's watching all of this. Or maybe you've been thinking from the perspective of a Pharisee or a Sadducee or a scribe who's been in these standoffs with Jesus. Now, to the best of your ability, because we can't perfectly do this, but think about Jesus and think about his outlook on this. He's been looking since he got to Jerusalem for somebody who is fulfilling their purpose. He's been looking for somebody who has the kind of faith that celebrates the Passover 1,500 years later in the way that it's supposed to be celebrated, with the spirit with which it's supposed to be celebrated. He's been looking for that person this whole time, and he didn't find it in the people who were throwing down palm trees and robes. He didn't find it in the merchandisers at the temple. He didn't find it in the Pharisees. He didn't find it in the scribes. He didn't find it in the Sadducees. He didn't even really find it in his own disciples because they don't understand the whole fig tree bit. Where does he find it? In the poorest, most insignificant person there. She is fulfilling her purpose because she has faith in God. The kind of faith that says, all I have left is 2 small copper coins. Therefore, that is what I am going to give God. We're really good at not doing that. First of all, I think we have a lot more than 2 small copper coins. And because of that, we've been taught to hold on to it. It's easier to hold on to things that you're impressed by. It's easier to hold on to things that look shiny and neat. It's easier to hold on to things that seem to have significant value. In another famous series of stories, Luke chapter 15, 100 sheep, 1 goes missing. What does the shepherd do? He leaves the 99 to go find the 1. 10 coins, 1 goes missing. What does the woman do? She leaves the 9 to go find the 1. 2 sons. Both go missing. Only one of them realizes it. Part of what he's doing in constructing those 3 stories in that way is telling us this is the value you traditionally put on a sheep. And this is the value that you traditionally put on a coin. Let me teach you about the value that God gives to his children. The widow with her 2 mites, 2 copper coins, whatever you want to call them, is the only person that Jesus sees in Jerusalem fulfilling her purpose because she has faith in God enough to say, this is yours. And I might not eat today, and I might not have somewhere to sleep, but this is yours. And I'm giving it to you. Church, it's time for us to start fulfilling our purpose again. We've gotten really good at building merchandise houses. We've gotten really good at coming up with deep theological questions with which we feel like we can stump other people. We've gotten really good at going to fig trees and expecting them to give us figs just because, instead of realizing that those figs themselves come from God. And Jesus is surveying the world. And he's not looking for Pharisees, and he's not looking for Sadducees, and he's not looking for scribes. He's looking for widows with 2 mites who are willing to say, this is yours. And I might not eat today. And I might not have a place to sleep. Except that we live in 21st century America, so let me update the language. And I might not get that job. And I might not be well liked. And I might not be part of a community that's celebrated, like some communities of unrighteousness are. And my candidate may not win. And my church building may not look as nice as I want it to. And someone might laugh at me. And someone might call me backwards. And someone might even call me stupid. But this is yours. And I'm giving it to you. That is fulfilling the purpose of the church. That is what faith in God looks like. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its flavor, how shall the saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything, but to be thrown out and trampled. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket. But they put it on a stand, because this is his. Therefore, I will let myself give light to all who are in the house. And let my light so shine before men that they may see my good works, not to glorify me, but to give glory to my Father who's in heaven. That's what faith in God looks like. This morning, do you have faith in God? Don't answer that unless you need it. Don't answer that and leave here with 2 mites still in your pocket. Because whatever that is for you, that is what he's asking of you. Not out of selfishness, not because he needs it. Scripture reading from earlier. He doesn't live in temples that we build. He doesn't need anything that we can give him, because he gives to all. He's asking you for those 2 mites because those 2 mites are what are holding you back from being the person that he made you to be. And it's the faith that allows me to give those up. To give them to the one who will give me much more than that in the long run. That's who he's looking for. Maybe you need to do that for the first time this morning by repenting of your sins and being baptized for the forgiveness of those sins. Maybe you need to do it in a whole host of ways. Maybe you need the prayers of the church. Maybe you need to go to a trusted friend in the church, a mentor, a confidant. Maybe you just need to talk to God more intently than you have in a while. Whatever your need may be, the invitation's open. If we can help you in any way, please come and stand. There's a promise.